this particular presentation is known as the State of the Tradition. And how much it will or will not stay on that particular topic remains to be seen. And as I was saying earlier, if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. Because the whole point of being here in person is so we can communicate more directly. And I think that is probably our keynote for the State of the Tradition this year, communication. And we have been trying very hard to have increased communication around the world with people, mainly using what we've been using these many years, the internet. We've created a number of new Facebook groups to help to connect people through the different degrees. We have been experimenting with different ways of broadcasting ritual, different ways of getting people together through audio means, through video means, and we're hoping to really increase the level of communication. One of the things people often tell us is that they feel isolated. And we've heard that from people here in Africa, we've heard it from people in Australia, we've heard it from people in South America, and we hear it from people in the US all the time. So it actually isn't unique to here. And I personally think that we have a lot more communication than many other traditions. But I think that what it is that, well, you know, whenever you like someone, you want to communicate with them more. And I think that we're very blessed to have a lot of nice people who really want to have more communication with each other. And I think that we really want to do everything we can to facilitate that. And so what I would say to you here and to anybody else who happens to see this, any ideas you have for communication, please bring them to us, because we want to have more. And you know, the world is getting smaller every day. And a conference like this, would have been almost unthinkable, say, 30 years ago. But they happened, certainly, but for a Wiccan tradition, it would be very unusual. And today, we have people all over the world who regularly talk online, and like this, we are beginning to have events around the planet. This is only the second lustration we've had outside of the United States. And I'm hoping that it will not be the last one. And you know, I really didn't know what to expect in coming, because no matter where it's being held, every illustration is different. They all have their own personality. You never know who's going to show up. Because even if people say they're going to show up, it doesn't mean they do. And even if they don't say they're coming, sometimes they show up at the door. And I have to say that you have a very good turnout. And I hadn't been sure if it would be me and Rain and Brett sitting here. We would, in fact, have a good turnout. And the thing that is most memorable about illustrations, and Rain and I were talking about this briefly just a little while ago, it really is the personal connection that you get to make. And the presentations are wonderful, but the thing people really remember is the social time. And very often people who are at illustrations have come a long way to be here. And I know that some of the people here have come a long way. From Johannesburg, from Durban, and from other places whose names I don't remember at the moment. But I know that they have, and for that matter, from Pennsylvania, and other points west. And so, I mean, we don't have the chance to be literally in the same room all the time. So it's wonderful to be able to do that. But what we want to have is increasingly we want people to feel that they are in the same room, even when they're on different continents. And the state of the tradition at the moment is how to increasingly have that feeling. Throughout the tradition system and the related systems that we work with, I'd say that is probably our greatest priority. And so what you're going to be seeing, hopefully, will be more communication, more groups that people can be involved with, more chats, more radio shows, more videos, and hopefully more events. And so anything we can do to facilitate that is really where we're trying to put our focus at the moment. The other thing we're trying to do is to create more infrastructure. And infrastructure is very tricky, because it helps to iron out problems and it creates them. And you probably know that yourselves. The more people that you have who are in a position of organizing things, the more things can go wrong. And at the same time, the more things can be straightened out. tomorrow at the actual lustration ceremony, we always have a section for announcements. And we do have some announcements that are going to be very important, and they have to do with changes coming to the Council of Elders and to the structure of the tradition itself. And it's only the beginning of what are going to be much larger changes, but the whole idea is to involve more people in the administration. For many years, we've had a relatively few who were involved in administration because we really were beginning to build this infrastructure. And now it's time to expand it. And we are hoping that everyone who wants to be involved in organizing and facilitating and working really hard will be able to find a place to do so. And last week at the kickoff party, one of the things I was saying, because many of the people who are organizing the groups and so forth were there, and I was thanking them for their hard work and assuring them there's more coming. And I'll say the same thing here. We're not getting smaller, and therefore the workload isn't getting smaller either. But it's fun. When it stops being fun, then it's probably time to do something else within the tradition. But so far, the expansion of communication, I think, is a very enjoyable thing. You know, one of the things that I love is to see the differences in places and people. And I get terribly, well, it's not my favorite experience when everything's the same. I was very shocked, well, can't say I was really shocked, but I was a little disappointed that the very first sign I saw getting off the airplane in South Africa was for Subway. I was kind of hoping for something more local in its origin. But Mama Africa did a lot to make up for that. But one of the things that we have now within our tradition is a huge amount of local variation. And we're beginning to have more and more materials in languages other than English. We have a lot of people now whose only familiarity with our teaching materials is in Spanish. We have people coming in who have other languages as their first language. We mostly don't have people who are unfamiliar with English at all, but I don't think that's going to stay that way. And our translators are very busy helping people for whom English is not their first language. And I think, again, we're only going to see that expand. We have people, well, we have people all over the world, which is why we're all here. And one of the things I was talking to Rain about a little while ago is how many things you have here in Africa that we don't have in the US. And our Correllian people in South America won't have either. And our Correllian people in Australia won't have either, although we all have our own things. But sharing that knowledge is, I think, one of the most enjoyable things that's in our future. And Brett had brought out smudge sticks earlier, and I cannot remember exactly the name of the herb.
Mpefu.
Mpefu?
Yeah.
Mpefu smudge sticks. He referred to them as African sage, which I'm assuming is probably more approximate than literal, but they were lovely. And I don't think any of our people in the US will have ever heard of this before. And I find it fascinating when there's something that I've never heard of before. And I'm really hoping that we can, all of us, on all of the different continents, share what we have that the others have not heard of before. And in the third degree book, for those of you who have been to the third degree book already, and those who haven't, you'll hear it for the first time. But in the third degree book, it talks about how when I came to third degree, Lady Crystal pointed out to me at the time of my initiation that it wasn't an ending; it was a beginning of further growth. Nothing ends the journey of learning, and there's always more to learn. There's always more to share, and there's always more to do. And for me, the enlarging of our knowledge of metaphysics, the sharing of the things that each of us has that are unique, really is a huge part of the journey. And what I hope to see, I'll backtrack a bit and say that when I interview people, I often ask them what they want to see in the future. And what I want to see in the future is a transition from, how can I best put this? I hope that I cannot accurately forecast exactly what I will see in 5 years, and I'll be very disappointed if I could. Because I hope that the coming together of knowledge from all over the globe will really transform us in ways we can't imagine. And one of the things that I think is most important about our tradition, so we do have an emphasis on expanding metaphysical knowledge, not just passing it on, not just reproducing it, but growing it. And also our rituals, also our social structures, we're moving into a whole new world. And when I think about my childhood among the dinosaurs, and consider where we're at today, there have been gigantic changes. And the next however many years are going to bring just as many changes, and we really need to be right on the crest of those changes. We need to embrace them, we need to apply them to our lives and our faith, and make sure that we are constantly relevant and constantly transformed, because there's no point in living now if we're not living now. And we are in a religion where we are constantly inspired by our ancestors. But our ancestors themselves would want us to carry their knowledge into the future and expand it. And that's what we do. And again, if I could predict exactly what was going to come, I would be disappointed. And if I were to go back 13 years to the first time I was here in South Africa, if I had tried to predict then what I would expect to have seen 13 years later, I would not have predicted this. And I'm much happier with what is here than what I thought might be here, because it's gone better. And I was saying yesterday, a lot of that is due to Rain as an individual, and also to all of you as individuals. But 13 years ago, we had a very different cast of characters here. Very nice people. Many of them have gone their own way since, and to places other than this. But when that change came, Rain stepped up and said, hello, I'm here. I'm very young, but I want to help. And I said, good. And the rest is led here. And I'm very glad that you did that, because otherwise I have again, who could predict what else would have happened? But what has happened is wonderful. And it's the same across the tradition. If we could go back 20 years, if I had tried to predict where we'd be today, I couldn't have done it. In fact, actually, Edward and I used to talk about how a friend of ours named Rosemary Fletcher, who was one of the best psychics I've ever known, had done a reading for him, telling him that one day he'd be doing an international daily newspaper. And this was early 1990s. And we thought that's exactly what she was talking about, a print newspaper going out around the world. How you do that, I don't know. But of course what she was talking about was the internet, which people generally did not know about then. And she turned out to be exactly right. But she couldn't predict it in exact terms because she did not have them. And what will be here in 20 years from now, in terms of technology, in terms of how the world works, we don't have words for, because I can't imagine the growth is going to slow down. It will only speed up. And how that will affect our community is another thing that we cannot predict, but we can guide it by being in the forefront of change. And if we want that change to take us where we want to be, we need to stay in the forefront. And we have the good fortune of being in the forefront because we've made that commitment. If you were to go back to the 1970s, when I was a young witch in the middle of the United States, the most advanced communications we had were amateur magazines that were often Xeroxed. If they were really popular, they would be printed on newsprint. They were typed up on typewriters with hand-drawn illustrations and taped together and then reproduced. And if you knew somebody, you might be able to get a copy, because you couldn't just walk out somewhere and buy them. Although if you had a metaphysical store near you, which very few people did, you might, in some cases, find them there. Often you wouldn't. You'd more likely find them at festivals. Today, people can find us so much more easily, and we can find each other so much more easily. And no one would have thought that there would be rituals on radio or in chat rooms, or that you could be sitting in Chicago and watch a ritual going on in South Africa, or any of numerous other things we're kind of taking for granted now because we've been doing it for a while. But who knows what we'll do next year? And that really is, for me, where the focus of the tradition is now. And I think that all of you are going to be on that forefront, whether you want to be or not. Because we will keep holding onto your hand. And I'm already working on pressing Rain into the next step. Because we were talking about it earlier, but we won't go there right now. I want to thank Rain, I want to thank Brett, I want to thank everybody who's organizing their groups and their activities here for the hard work that you're doing. And Mornay did a wonderful ritual for the opening ceremony, and thank you. And there's lots of wonderful stuff coming up. And with that, I thank you for your attention, and we might be a little closer to being back on schedule.